Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Eunice Kang, and it is my privilege and honor to be introducing our undergraduate student panel here at Vanguard University. As you know, recently we had the second Republican presidential debates. So we wanted to provide a student perspective, a college student perspective on who won the debate, how they think the debate went, because you have a lot of political talking heads on the news. That's great, but we really wanted to hear from the young generation of today. So I just want to introduce our panel. If you can quickly introduce yourself with your name, major, and year, that'll be great. Well, why don't we start off with Payton?
Hello, my name is Payton Kowalski. I am a senior right now, and I'm a history poli-sci major.
Wonderful. Hello, my name is Matthew Mason. I am a sophomore studying political science and history.
Hi, I'm Victoria Rio. I'm also studying history and political science, and I'm a freshman.
My name is James Connor. I am a freshman and I'm studying business.
Hello, I am Gabriel Ramirez. I am actually undeclared right now, but either a theo or business major, and also a freshman.
Okay, great. Can we give a round of applause to our and by the way, what can I say? Where are you guys from? Just to provide some context.
I mean, I'll start. I'm from rural Southern Oregon. It's called Road River.
Okay.
Should I go next? I'm from Irvine, California, which is just about 20 minutes from here.
I'm from Dana Point, California, a small surf town in South Orange County.
I'm from Sacramento, California.
From Ontario, California.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, I want to start off this panel by first asking you, who do you think won the debate overall, and why? So why don't we start off with Victoria?
We should not start with me.
Too late.
To preface, I did not complete the debate. I watched the majority of it, did my best, but I had some other stuff to do. I don't think there's a clear winner. I'm always a very middle ground person. I think Ramaswamy did really well in terms of getting lots of policies and points across, but I think it depends on how we define who won. Then I have different opinions on.
Yeah. All right. Anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, it was actually really coincidental, funny because I was also kind of thinking something very similar, that it really does kind of come down to how do you define what does it mean to have won the debate?
Who impressed you the most?
Oh, okay, because I mean, originally what I was going to say was Donald Trump because he's up in the polls and no one's been able to knock him down for the debate. But if the argument is who do we just think is like the most skilled debater and has the best public speaking skills, I would probably say Ron DeSantis. And obviously Donald Trump would not be in consideration since he didn't attend.
In my full honest opinion, the person who I think has exceeded everyone's expectations and has shown himself to be a true contender, this is Vivek Ramaswamy. He's coming as one of the youngest people being attacked for that the most. He's always had an answer for everything that he's asked, even when he's quote unquote being called out by the other panelists or other
Candidates.
Thank you. It never seems like he is folding under pressure, and he's not letting people talk over him, which could be a very easy thing for someone of his age and who isn't so prominent in the political.
I completely agree, especially because as someone who doesn't have political experience, we expected so little out of him that the amount that he is showing up and the policy he's saying and sharing. I mean, all politicians have it, but because we haven't seen him in that atmosphere yet, we really didn't know where he was going. And so I would definitely say that he was impressive in the debate.
Very good.
Yeah, I also think Vivek was very impressive, and I definitely also agree that expectations were relatively low for him since he doesn't have any political experience and very little public awareness. Although I'm somewhat critical of the Ramaswamy campaign, just for the reason that it doesn't really seem like he has a pathway to the presidency. He knows that, and it kind of just feels like he's kind of more like running for vice president or like secretary of the treasury or something like that.
No, absolutely agree. I mean, if we're talking about critical on campaigns, I'm critical on all these campaigns, but that's kind of how politics works, is there's goods, there's bads, but you prioritize what you think. I do think his running for president is more of a publicity stunt than it is to run for president, because he is polling pretty high for what we kind of thought he was going to do. But I still think he's going to try and do another high position in government, and this is just like his political experience, and he'll later run for president.
I mean, even still, pulling out his, coming in at the age of 38
Mhm.
puts him in such a position where he's 30 years younger than some of the other candidates. Not 30 years, but about 20, 25 years younger than some of the other candidates. So this means he is just starting, and he's already in the second round polling higher than some of the other people, and it's impressive in showing that he's not stopping here.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean,
this is not his last time.
no, you're totally right. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, he's polling higher than Mike Pence, the former vice president of the United States. I mean, who's a very,
Isn't it so surprising that he's polling higher than Mike Pence?
Not at all. Mike Pence's, these speeches have shown that he is very incompetent.
But he was the vice president of the United States.
I'm
He
surprised
never
Chris
talked.
Christie is polling higher than Pence. From a lot of people I've spoken to who are more Republican leaning, don't like Chris Christie for various reasons. But Mike Pence already has this like federal government standing, and we were talking about earlier how he is really popular with evangelicals and things like that. So just him being evangelical, that's what I meant to say. And so him like polling so low is a little surprising to me, honestly.
I think it's interesting too, because the Republican Party is really at a crossroads right now,
Mhm.
because they pretty much stake their identity on Donald Trump, right, as a front runner. Especially considering that, over the last couple of years, it feels like they've been a bit more just like reactionary to what the Democratic policies, like I would argue that like the last true like Republican candidate we've had for president that like actually like instituted policies, like would be like you say, like Bush and Reagan, right? I mean, like it's just Trump feels like it feels like the Republican Party has just a desire to like be in control, and they realize Trump is a front runner for that, and they're kind of stuck now. It's like, okay, well, on one hand, he's extremely unpopular, but on the other hand, he's also like everybody, like if we're gonna get in office, it's gonna be through him.
well, I think you can also obviously kind of divide a lot of the candidates into two different categories. Obviously, you maybe have like the more Trumpy, like Trumpist or populist or national conservative, whatever you want to call them, candidates, people like Trump, people like Governor DeSantis, people like Ramaswamy, and then maybe you have more like libertarian or like Reaganite, kind of like fiscally conservative people and like strong on defense, like fusionism, people like Mike Pence and Doug Burgum and Nikki Haley and Chris Christie,
Although I think Trump, DeSantis and Ramaswamy are some of the most popular because there's so much media attention on them. Ramaswamy has a lot of media attention because he's not familiar with politics and he's so young and he's in tech and business. And then DeSantis in the last year has like passed all these things and done all of these actions as the governor of Florida. Of course, there's all the media surrounding Trump. And so there's all of this that I feel like when people aren't looking at the debates and they aren't researching these things, they are polling for those top three because that's who they're seeing in the media.
I fully believe with what Nancy did during COVID is pushing him through this election. His not shutting down, not following the federal drive is pulling so many people who are just either very pro-Trump, and that's the best way I can put it, pro-Trump on how they are anti-federal government, is bringing more voters for him than anything else.
What I appreciate though is that when they ask him questions about the stuff he's done in the last year in Florida, he not only has how he did it, but he has the statistics to back it up. Although I feel like asking all of the other former governors and governors the similar questions across the board, they didn't really answer how they would keep that as president when they don't have the same actions and they don't have the same reach as governor.
Gabriel, you wanna jump in?
Well, I'd probably speak about who actually won the debate. I don't really think anyone actually won this one. I think it just shows, like personally to me, it just kind of spoke to like each person, each candidate's character, because a lot of them were speaking over each other. It wasn't like that really, to me at least, it doesn't really doesn't show that would be someone that's exactly like acting presentable to be like a president, especially with Christie, how he was like making a lot of jokes, kind of like being like Trump, which I think that's definitely going to push a lot of people away. Like even he was like, well, you're going to be called rather than Donald Trump, Donald Duck, and did like a lot of things like that. I don't know how well that's showing off and actually trying to build the Republican Party together. I think it was very divisive, this debate.
Especially when Trump is polling the highest, like making jokes about Trump. I mean, he was getting more cheers this election than last time. He was getting some boos, but I didn't hear so much this time. But like I think it is what you're saying.
I mean, looking at it, what he's doing is he's basically, like kind of as you said, he is using Trump's formula of attacking and trying to demean his fellow candidates. That just shows the complete divide in what Trump has influenced in how we, as a political just system, are running. As of right now, it's become an attack of character and attacking of people instead of attacking a problem and an issue.
Well, I mean, it's always sort of been like that, right? I think that
No,
with, well, social media, I think it's been exaggerated, right? But we can look back to like previous elections, you know, and we can look at like tabloids, like for example, the election in 1860, leading up to Lincoln's election. Like we look at those tabloids from especially like Southern papers.
Yeah.
There was some pretty nasty stuff in there about like this. Especially you had the little race thing in there too.
It goes back to John Adams, like
Yeah.
there was campaigns on, like attack campaigns on both sides. This is nothing new, but as you said, with
Yeah.
social media and everything, it is just skyrocketed and become such a theatrical.
I mean, social media is just really putting into light what's always been there, I
Yeah.
think.
Well, and I think it's almost amplified because of social media. There's so much fake news, and then we just keep dividing. So then there's more exaggerates, and news, like the headings get more exaggerated and less informative. And you have these things. There was an article that came out about 2 years ago saying soldier age people were being flown in the US and that they were dangerous. But if you read the same thing from a Democratic side, it's immigrant age, but really it's just young adults, you know, that kind of like, that's the age of it. And it needs to be more fact and less, oh, it's this, oh, it's that, before we even see what it is.
I think I'm gonna jump in and thank you so much for all your contributions to that first question. I want to move on to the second question. Were there any moments or exchanges in the debate that you thought were memorable, whether in a good way or was it memorable in a negative way? Was it cringeworthy? So I want to know some memorable moments. And I want to start off with Gabriel and then go down one at a time this way. And after you're done, maybe the next person can, you know, go on. But Gabriel, I also wanted to give you a chance to finish off your last thought on the first question, then move on to the second question if you want.
I think probably be able to, or actually, yeah, probably be able to move on from the first question, but to the second question, any like memorable or cringeworthy actual points of it? The whole cringeworthy was like this all like kind of being mad at each other and also like being divisive. I think that was very cringeworthy and also like memorable to like the bad side of it, towards me at least. But I do like what a good type of memorable thing that came out was it was Tim Scott, how he brought up kind of a lot of things about, well, he's kind of the only one that talked about the Lord or talked about God, and how that could influence like the United States. And that was kind of one of the memorable things to me, at least, you know, being a Christian and having that as like pretty much my whole values and going to school for that and all that type of stuff, where that was one of the main things that really spoke out to me, and also why I kind of am leaning towards like if there was someone to win, it would probably be Tim Scott in my opinion, because also he's kind of been on the business side, but he's also been like a senator, worked in the government. So he kind of, I like, you know, being able to have both of that because, you know, as a country, we kind of run as a business. So I definitely do enjoy that rather than Ramaswamy, because he's just been on the business side, really not have any like actual government experience, which could be harmful to him. And there's also other people in around the world that, you know, it's a first time candidate to other countries and they'll kind of destroy it. I'm pretty sure that's what's happening in France. He was the first, whoever it is there, don't quote me on this. Yeah, but he's kind of, there's a whole bunch of bad things that are going on with France, with riots and all that type of stuff, because hasn't, you know, it's his first time being in that rule in place. So that's just kind of my opinion on that.
Okay, so
Your memorable or cringeworthy moments.
I think the most memorable moment was Ramaswamy's kind of how he kept getting attacked for having companies in China and how there were multiple different candidates who would bring that up. But I find it funny how a lot of they could do that, forgetting that a lot of their promotion teams, a lot of their companies that create their like merchandise and a lot of their like, oh, vote for me stickers are all connected or running through China. And that was just a memorable moment for me, and how he always had a response to it. That kind of plays into why I truly believe that he won this debate, or at least he's gonna pull higher from this debate. Because I so much respect for this man. I will be honest, I'm not very biased, but a little biased because of how young he is and how well spoken and how well of an attitude he has under all the pressure from these full
So your number one right now is Ramaswamy.
100%.
Okay, interesting.
I have a couple of moments. I agree with that, with the Ramaswamy moment. I also think, just the years were definitely different. When he did talk about pulling his company out of China, then Nikki Haley and I believe it was Tim Scott were like, oh, right before you ran for president, and they were saying it was in 2023. Later Pence mentioned it and he said 2018, I believe, yeah. So it's just the kind of like, when did he pull out of China, the stuff that we have to look up on our own as voters.
I bet he pulled out in 2018. It was
So-
2023.
It's the exaggeration of politics, which like for me makes me almost embarrassed for the candidates who don't get that right on purpose, you know, to make it like seem like he pulled out last year. But I mean, I also respect Pence for saying it was 2018. He did like put backlash on it. But just kind of that. And also I really found Nikki Haley's comment on Ramaswamy super disrespectful and unprofessional, even in politics, saying that she feels like she's getting dumber every time he talks. And you can have that opinion, but saying that is just, there are other ways to go about that that are way more political and politically respectful that don't sound so casual.
What was the exact way she said it? She said,
She's like,
every time.
yeah, she's like, I swear to God, every time you open your mouth, I feel like I'm getting dumber. I believe that's a paraphrase. But
I fully believe this comes from how Trump would talk in the 2016 debates. It was just attacking people's character, and everyone is starting to copy that.
And I feel like that was a little bit out of character for Nikki Haley, no?
Absolutely. And I also think that's kind of where her change went, because before I appreciated she was talking a lot about statistics and using that as policy, which is why political science is so important. And almost after that comment, all of her stuff was just policy and not using a lot of research evidence as a governor, her experience to back that up. So it was kind of the switch for me, which definitely put me off a little bit.
So it was off-putting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, I definitely agree with Victoria and James that Governor Haley's attitude towards Ramaswamy and she kind of misstreamed definitely, I think is definitely not a negative, definitely not a positive view of her. I think that definitely hurt her. But at least for my more original contributions, I guess I have two. One is and they're both cringe. One is so one is Tim Scott, and I'm openly admit I'm not a big fan of the senators, but I guess what I found is whenever he talked about religion, it really felt forced and almost and like borderline disingenuous to me.
Scripted.
Yeah, I know. Well, definitely scripted, but also I mean, when you just kind of look at, I mean, as it says in scripture, you'll know the tree by its fruit. I mean, when you look at Senator Scott, he's never been married, he has no kids, and I mean, I think that's kind of very concerning to me. I think that should be concerning to a lot of Christians and religious people, that the person who wants to lead this nation has no children that will be affected by his decisions. He's never been married to a woman before, and also, I mean, it just seems like I don't know how you can really fully be living out your Christian faith if you're going to be 60 years old and never married to somebody and like never even try to pursue that. I mean, that just seems very
I
odd
feel
to
like
me.
there's definitely contrast there for me, concerning, I mean, as Christians, we follow Jesus. Jesus also didn't have children, wasn't married. I mean, we are his children, we're the son of God.
Paul. A lot of the apostles were
True.
single, never married, never had, or
But-
some of them did, but very few.
Well,
I
it's
also
different
agree with part of your point where he
100%.
seems passionate about topics, but at the same time, Nikki Haley mentioned this, I believe. In the 12 years he's been in Congress, there hasn't been a lot of stuff that he has been behind that's done anything. And of course, it's not just his fault. He's just one vote, but that's part of working in Congress is networking and building connections with people to do that and to make what's better and to like future our government.
Payton, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Do you, respectfully disagree or agree with what Matt said? And your thoughts on your most memorable moment?
I thought what Chris Christie said about Trump not showing up to the debates was for me to highlight, because I think if Trump is going to lose this election, it's gonna be that the way he's behaving himself in these debates. I think I was talking to James earlier, and a lot of the bulk of Trump supporters are either, what would you say?
I said they're either young white males from the ages 18 to 25 who are trying to be quote unquote edgy or against today's culture, or old men who are so or like old 50-year-old white men who are so behind on today's standards of how to act that they're just going with the person that pisses everyone off.
And I think we have to remember too, the big reason why Trump was elected was because of a frustration from largely the middle class, where Democrats thought they had it in the bag, and they're like, okay, we're just gonna keep, feeding the gravy train of these, like, whatever, like things like people who are on like welfare and whatnot, they assumed that they'd vote for Democrats because like, we're benefiting from our administration. But instead what we saw was the people elected populists, someone who was a bit of a wild card, didn't know what was gonna happen, out of frustration for the system that had failed to take care of the middle class, which was by far, like in terms of like American populations, is suffering the most under recent administrations. It's shrunken, it's harder to get a job now, housing is more expensive. The gap between the poor and the rich is getting a lot bigger. So electing someone like Trump was more of just kind of like, okay, well, if you're not gonna take care of us, then we're gonna elect someone like him, and we don't care where this country goes. So I think with that in mind, if Trump's not holding up to his promises, which, that's debatable between, Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters, I think he's at risk of taking it for granted he's gonna win. Because I think that the bulk of his supporters, like James said, are a small demographic compared to regular Americans who just want a somewhat of a normal life and have a well life as well.
Well, and I think the other thing is, with the first debate, he had an interview that kind of came out around the same time, didn't he? But he didn't have one this time, and I think like in the first debate, that helped him a lot, just kind of, because we watched both for class and we did comments on both. And that was kind of his, conversation of that, but not having one this time and not having any sort of media attention for this is, even though he's polling at the top right now, I believe it's giving room for the others to grow faster.
The only media attention that he got for this entire debate was being attacked by the other candidates. He had no response, he had nothing of value that came in. He has just thrown away any chance that he got from growing in the polls or growing in his support
And this
from
was
this
about
debate.
2 weeks ago, right?
Yeah,
And there's been not a word that I've heard of at least.
Well, then also keep in mind too, Trump's primary method of announcing his policies or whatever was his Twitter account. I mean, that's what made him so unique, was that like everyone's frankly entertaining to watch was because he didn't want to do interviews in the media. And even though personally I'm not a Trump supporter, I understand why he did that, because media, no matter what side of the aisle they lean on, is biased. They're gonna butcher everything you say. So I honestly I thought it was funny, actually. I enjoyed watching the media get flustered about Trump's Twitter account, because I think it's a sad state that a politician, an American who's holding a ballot office, should be afraid to go on the media for fear that they're gonna contort their words.
I just think if you, like, with the media attention and the fact that he's used it before, especially in the last election and during his own presidency, if you have that taken away from you, you need to find another outlet to advertise yourself. That's the importance of politics, is if you're not staying up with everything in the media and where people's eyes are, then you will not be seen.
Do you think his absence from a second Republican presidential debate, do you think that hurts his campaign?
Absolutely.
Overall? I just wonder if it's
I don't have a single
Everyone
note
here
or
agrees
any
that it
card.
hurts him except for
Matthew.
Yeah, you're not.
Go on, you know what, man?
Because, well, no, the reason why, because when you look at the polls, both nationally, which are not as important, because obviously we don't have national elections, we have statewide elections, but if you look at the national polling, which is still important, and especially if you look at like early primary states, like Iowa, like New Hampshire, Trump still his lead has not shrunk or diminished it at all. In fact, in some places it's actually increased. And so from my perspective, if Trump doesn't go to the debate and then his polls drop, like his lead dropped by like 10 points, right? Then, you could say that maybe, that hurt him. But if his polls either stay the same on the average, or in some places increase, I mean, what's the motive? Practically speaking, I mean, I agree with you guys in principle, which is practically, but just practically speaking, the voters just don't seem to care that much, because because like you said, a lot of his base are these Trump loyalist people who will literally will support him, whatever, will support him no matter what, regardless of any circumstance. So he doesn't need to earn their vote because they've unconditionally already given it to him.
But I feel like at the same time, he's at risk for losing. I don't think the whole thing, absolutely not, but I think at least a small percentage, because as these debates go on, if he doesn't continue to show up, he doesn't bring a media presence, even if he stays up here and drops the tiniest bit, all of these other voters are coming up. and it's closing that gap. And in that way, even if he's staying the same, that's still hurting his campaign.
And this is only the second debate. And the biggest thing that you have to look at is once people stop talking about him at the debates and truly focus on policy and what they're going to do or what they say they are going to do, he's gonna lose every bit of media attention. There's still gonna be, I don't know for a fact, Fox is still gonna say stuff about him. And that's what a lot of majority of conservative right-wing people use for their source of news, because it's conservative right-wing's news source. But even still, the longer that he is silent, the worse it's going to get. Now, I'm not saying that now it is, but just factually and looking at it from a,
So if he keeps this up.
if he keeps this up, he's not gonna be,
Also,
he's not gonna win.
so.
Well, I think the question we need to ask ourselves too is that like, if Trump wins the election, like why? Like what about Trump? Like,
Primary or the general?
the primary, the general, like presidential election.
Okay,
If he wins it, like let's just say, or even a primary, right? Like why? Like why? Like
What
about
drove
him?
people to do it?
Exactly.
Yeah,
You know, I would probably say what drove people to do them without him actually speaking out. Where a lot of people, after seeing what's been happening with Biden, how our economy is, stuff like that, they're gonna be like, oh, look how Trump was before, gas was a lot cheaper, all these other types of things. They're just kind of like remembering that. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen the sticker like of Biden's like, I did that, it's pointing to like the gas
Yeah, like,
pump or all kinds of other things like that. So like, I think it's probably just people like, oh, look at what, Trump, yeah, we did have some, a lot of things good happen in the economy and all those types of, other types of things that are gonna be pushing people towards Trump, that are maybe not exactly, up on it.
but the thing is, gas is statewide.
But do you think there's any, I guess what I'm asking is there like any ideological,
Yeah,
like what ideologically drives people to vote for him?
Honestly, not really much.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's pretty much just like who he kind of is as like, I would probably say as like personal, what he did. Like, that's the main like thing, that's what actually like drew people to him. But then once he actually got into presidency, I think he did, a fair amount of stuff. But I think it is definitely gonna be very harmful, like him not actually being able to speak out at these debates, be able to give an answer to, what the other candidates are saying. Because if you hear like all in the news everywhere, even, on Biden's, Twitter feed, they're all talking bad about Trump. Everyone's, talking bad about Trump, and he doesn't really have much way that he's actually speaking out against that, or kind of like rephrase or, being able to give an answer.
well, like
Sorry, I'm gonna actually jump in real quick, if that's okay.
no worries, no worries.
I would like to move on to another question. The question is, who do you think is gonna be the best person to handle Putin and to deal with the war in Ukraine? Who is the best person to run our foreign policy on that?
Well, I think there's a value statement, right? I mean, define success in foreign policy, right? Because I think we need to address like our goals, right? I mean,
Do we want to stay out?
exactly. If you're saying within the realm of traditional politics, like traditional American foreign policy, I've spent over the last 60, 70 years and the aftermath of World War II and the build of NATO alliances in key regions around the world, notably the Pacific. I think that then sure. Right, but then someone like Trump, who's unabashedly an isolationist, that's a different perspective,
Yeah, well, I completely agree with what Payton said, is that you have to define, like, when you're talking about, like, what does it mean to have, like, the best Ukraine policy, right? Like, obviously, Nikki Haley, I mean, you can just see it, she is very hawkish, she's very hawkish towards Putin and Russia, and obviously, she would be the toughest on him among probably anybody else in American
Yeah,
politics.
if she gets elected, I wouldn't be surprised if the war.
I mean,
escalates.
actually, just going back to what Victoria said, when she said, you make me dumber comment, that was in response to him like saying something about drawing down troops, near Ukraine or saying, or limiting Ukraine aid. So like, obviously, she really cares about Ukraine, but at least from my perspective, I don't really share Nikki Haley's perspective on that, so I would not want her. I probably want someone like DeSantis, who is very much focused on shifting our focus from Europe and shifting it, towards China, shifting it towards the Pacific, and also shifting it towards South America, which has generally been our kind of traditional, sphere of influence. We go back to things like the Monroe Doctrine. Generally, the Americas were our territories.
Yeah.
And then also, obviously, China would just be an exception because, at least in my perspective, and I think Governor DeSantis' perspective and other people's, China is a unique threat
Yeah, I agree.
that deserves an exception to this rule.
Russia proved itself incompetent.
Right.
100%. My only thing with that, and the only reason I would lean towards more Nikki, is because looking at it from a morality point and a Christian standpoint, we are called to protect the weaker man.
Yes.
Ukraine is,
Yeah.
Ukraine, as much as they are a great fighting force and a strong people, they are the weaker man at this point, and they're starting to lose the leverage that they've had. So coming from my faith and my belief, I believe we should go and help them. And that's the only, I will always pray for a better thing and try to steer clear of war, try to steer clear of conflict. But this is one where there are innocent people dying, there are people being mutilated, there are people being, they're tortured, there's women being raped, children being executed. It's a show of a
But that's
evil force that needs to be taken.
Well, I have two things real quick and then, sorry, you can go. First off, maybe you should be telling that to Germany and all the other NATO countries that have not fulfilled their military spending obligations for decades now, and the United States has been subsidizing those. So maybe, and obviously, it's very plausible that if Germany had been spending 2.5% of its GDP on defense and all the other countries that weren't doing that, that Putin would have felt like there was too great of a threat. And just because of the fact that a lot of Western European countries were not doing that, that they were, unable to actually defend it. So I don't think you should need to put all of it on the United States, because there's a lot of other wealthy and rich countries like Germany and France and the United Kingdom. And then just my second point real quick is that, what about Taiwan or the Philippines? And people don't talk about the Philippines, but China is just as likely to invade the Philippines as they are to invade Taiwan. And what if we spend all of our money, spend all of our military resources on defending Taiwan, on spending on Ukraine? Right now, we obviously, you cannot spend an unlimited amount of money. We have finite resources. What if we put everything into Ukraine, and then when China takes invades Taiwan, invades the Philippines, maybe starts, pressuring South Korea, we don't have anything
Okay.
left in order to defend them.
So on that, I think so Taiwan is a whole, I think we need to stop comparing Taiwan to Ukraine because it's different, right? Within a military operation, Taiwan is unique, right? Because it would involve a joint, what's called a joint operation, right? Because it's a multi-dimensional, you're talking about a multi-dimensional theater, right? Because there's air, sea, and land. Taiwan too, we've been supplying Taiwan with weapons for the last 60 years.
Yeah.
I honestly
It's
think
nothing.
it's 100% a psyop. Taiwan pretends to be weak, but their whole strategy is deterrence, right? Because China knows that if they attack Taiwan, Taiwan can do serious damage to Chinese infrastructure. In fact, one of Taiwan's strategies is actually to take out the three gorges dam with ballistic missiles, which they can't do, and that would cause unparalleled destruction in China. Further, China's at a crossroads right now, right? Because if China were, I think if China were going to invade Taiwan, they would be they'd be allying themselves closer to Putin. And I think Xi Jinping is very pragmatic, right? And that's what I'm saying at a crossroads, because the CCP has, for their whole identity, right, is based upon the one China policy. Going back to the end of the Civil War and the Kuomintang there, Taiwan is 100% a thorn in their side. However, Professor Wilson, taking modern China with him, describes the US and China as honestly one economy. I mean, if you really think about how interconnected we are, a war would be disastrous, and Xi Jinping knows this, right? So I think we can't compare Ukraine and Taiwan. The second part about Ukraine is that the way the Russians are behaving in Ukraine it's horrible, but it's not shocking, because the Russian army historically has behaved that way. I mean, look at the way they behaved in Afghanistan, in Finland, in Germany at the end of World War II. Like, objectively speaking, the Russian army historically has committed atrocities. It's nothing new, and as part of it is
It doesn't
yeah, it doesn't justify it. What I'm trying to say is that what I'd argue is that it's a product of Russian history, and that's a whole other rabbit trail we go down. Even before communism, the time of the czars, Russia has always been like that. It's their strategy has just been to brutalize the
barbaric strategy.
100%. So that's why I'm honestly pro defending Ukraine, simply because of that. As Jesus said, too much whom has been given, much is expected.
Again, then this just goes back to my main
But what's the
point.
Christ-like thing to do? That's what I'm trying to say.
That's the
guys in
hard part,
Britain,
is in the government that we're in
But
right now, they
Just
won't,
because
and that's
they
why.
can't, we're obligated to defend the health.
Okay, great. So what happens when we spend all our money on?
But
We're not gonna spend it all on
Okay,
that.
well, it's very clear that the Indo-PACOM commander in the Pacific has clearly stated that the United States currently does not have the military resources to have a multi-theater conflict in both Europe and in the Pacific. And I think a lot of military experts have been very clear
Then what
that
we
we
do
do
is
not do both.
Then what we do is we, just as you said, get the UN to help
Yeah,
Ukraine.
but that's assuming,
My
that's
fault.
assuming you find their own, and I would actually disagree with you, considering how it's Poland
Mhm.
and notably Italy and Spain, other European countries have stepped in to fill the gap where Germany is. Germany is unique, and I think you have to understand too, the generational trauma that is
Yeah.
in Germany from the Second World War. I mean, like, did that like
They're
completely,
terrified to get in.
yeah,
any
reverse
conflict.
like German psychology. Same thing with China, too, like with China, and Japan from World War II, like it's the same thing. In fact, that's all another Charlie go down is the impact of Japanese war crimes on Chinese psychology as a nation. That's really interesting. But like these things last, and that's what Germany's, the perspective they're coming from.
That's not an excuse to
I'm
not.
not saying it's an excuse, but like that,
These are things having to be
Yeah.
taken into account.
into account.
Well,
Yes.
of course, but I think one other point that needs to be clear is that Ukraine has a lot of potential allies it could be helping. We talked about like all the other NATO countries, especially like, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Italy.
But
right?
they're not.
I know, but they should be. And furthermore, when you look at a country like Taiwan or the Philippines, it's not like they have a plentiful amount of allies in the region.
No,
to help
they
them.
do. They have Japan, they have South Korea, they have the Vietnam, they have the
Vietnam,
Philippines, Taiwan.
you think Vietnam,
But it's.
No, Vietnam will help.
you think Vietnam,
Because what the strategy is called essentially is the first island chain, right? You have to understand, like, it's a link of allies, and I think we're simplifying warfare, and I'm just saying, like, I'm an intelligence analyst, like, I'm in the army, like, I know, I'm not an expert, but I'm familiar with how this works. Warfare is extremely complicated. Everybody thought the Russians would roll over Ukraine just because of the Russians, and look what's happening. It's been a year and almost 2 years later, and it's been, the war in Ukraine is like twice the amount of the war, the amount of deaths, Russian deaths in Afghanistan.
It's still
I would like to,
move on.
I would like to, end this panel on maybe a hopeful note. On a positive note.
Good idea, good idea.
And I just wanna end, with one last question. Maybe one representative can volunteer to maybe answer this last question. Like, as you know, here at Vanguard, we're a Christian faith, institution. And so, with that in mind, I know Christianity is not a monolith, but I guess you can talk on a personal level. When you vote, how are you gonna vote? Are you gonna let your faith and your religion dictate your religious beliefs? Or are you going to let politics affect and change your religion? And I don't know, a lot of different people may be wrestling with this, but I wanted to know how you've sort of dealt and wrestled with this issue. So maybe one person to kind of end it on a positive note would be
Victoria.
really wonderful.
Victoria.
I am very passionate about this topic, so I'm glad we
Oh, great.
all agree. I can talk. For my personal voting, always vote with the Christian mindset, but my Christian mindset is always about compassion for other people. I know that voting in self-interest, I mean, Washington talked about it in his farewell speech, and Jesus preaches about it, not voting, but being acting in self-interest doesn't benefit anyone but yourself. And sometimes you're just shooting yourself in the foot. And as a Christian, I have to think about what's good for other people, what's going to benefit us as a whole, what is going to decide our fate as a country and bring the most light. And of course, we have to sacrifice some things in place of others, and you just have to balance the good and the bad. And no candidate is perfect, no pairing of candidates is perfect. But this is something that is always on my heart as a Christian, is voting with compassion for other people. And of
Yeah.
course, don't, shoot yourself short and just go, well, who cares what I think? Like, this is everything for everyone else. But it's that balance of finding everything and finding what's good for everyone. And that's how I think in the Christian mindset, we should be voting.
Yeah, the rich man and Lazarus comes to mind when I think about that.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. I think that was, I would like to end it on that wonderful note. That we, can we continue with everyone's- I'd like to quickly move on, just really quickly to the second portion, to do a quick polling from everyone here in this room, who you think won, and you can define won in any way you want. This is not saying this is who you're gonna vote for, but after watching the debates and even listening to some of the commentary by your fellow peers, I'm wondering who you think at this point in time, who do you think won the debate? So I'm just gonna ask you guys to raise your hands. I'm gonna do a quick tally. I'm gonna name each of the 6 candidates that appeared on the debate. So I'm not gonna say Trump because he wasn't there. Who do you think won the debate is the question. So raise your hand real quick and I'll do a quick tally. Who do you think, if you think, let's start with Ron DeSantis. won the debate? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 12 people. Raise your hand if you think Tim Scott won the debate. Tim Scott? Okay. Raise your hand if you think Nikki Haley won the debate. Nikki Haley? Raise your hand if you think Mike Pence won the debate.
Holden and.
Raise your hand if you think Vivek Ramaswamy won the debate.
Oh, are we voting
One,
too?
yes, you can vote. Three,
No, we
Four.
can't say anything.
okay. Raise your hand if you think Doug Burgum
Oh, yeah,
won
that's
the
my
debate.
first choice, but.
All right,
I'm so
so
sorry, I didn't realize
in
that.
this
I-
very
I-
small class sample, the overall winner of the debate was Ron DeSantis.
DeSantis 2024.
All right, thank you so much for joining us and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Nice. Oh, dude.